Hello, this is Mr. Tipton, and today we are learning about circumference of a circle. To find the circumference of a circle, we use the formula C equals pi times d. The C stands for circumference. Pi, we'll talk more about here in a second. And then d, what part of a circle starts with a D? That is our diameter. So circumference is equal to pi times diameter. Now, what is pi? Pi has to do with circles. Okay, any size circle. Lots of circles. It doesn't matter what size they are. But what pi is if you take the distance around a circle, that's what circumference is. If you take the distance around and you divide it by the distance through the center, which is the diameter, the circumference divided by the diameter is equal to, it's this ratio that we call pi. And it doesn't matter which circle it is, how big it is. The distance around divided by the distance through the center is this ratio we call pi. Pi is irrational. We've talked about rational and irrational numbers. It's irrational because it makes a decimal that goes on forever and there is no pattern. We can't write pi as a fraction, so that's why it's irrational. Circumference, distance around, divided by the distance through the center is equals pi. Circumference divided by diameter is equal to pi. Now, most of the time, when we use pi, we just round it off to the nearest hundredth, and we use, what do we use? 3.14. Okay, 3.14 is not pi. Pi's decimal goes on forever. It doesn't repeat. This is just what we shorten it to for most of the problems that we do. Okay, so that's a little bit of background of pi, where it comes from. This is our formula for finding circumference. Pi times diameter. Let's look at some examples. Find the circumference. We're going to start with our formula. C is equal to pi times diameter. And we're going to substitute in what we know. For pi, we're going to use 3.14. And our diameter, given right here in the diagram, is 5. So we multiply 3.14 times 5, and we get 15.7 inches. It's that easy. Pi times diameter equals circumference. And this is our answer to the nearest tenth. One of the other things we need to be able to do is write our answer in terms of pi. That means actually having the pi symbol in our answer. And that's really easy. Because it just means instead of 3.14, we just leave the pi there and then put in the diameter. But we will rewrite it so that the 5 is in front of the pi, make it the coefficient, kind of like we do with, with 2x or negative 3y. We've got 5 pi. Okay? Two ways we have to be able to write our answer. Rounded to the nearest tenth, and in terms of pi. Let's look at example number 2. Start with the formula. Circumference is equal to pi times diameter. For pi, we're going to use 3.14 times, looks like the diameter is 4.2 this time. And when we multiply those and round to the nearest tenth, we get 13.2 feet. Our answer in terms of pi, we leave the pi symbol. Diameter was 4.2, but we just rewrite it so that the number part comes before the pi. Two different ways to write the answer: rounded to the nearest tenth and in terms of pi. Okay, let's look at another. A couple more examples. Same formula, C is equal to pi times diameter. C is equal to 3.14 times, not 7. Here's a very common mistake, is not paying attention to the part of the circle that you're given. Remember, we need diameter. D stands for diameter, which goes all the way across the circle. But what we're given is the radius, which is only from the circle to the center. So even though the radius is 7, the diameter of this circle is 14. Okay, so you have to be careful. Make sure you're paying attention to what part of the circle you're being given. And 44 centimeters for this one. And in terms of pi, we would just have 14 pi. Number 4, example 4, same deal as number 3. We're only given the radius, but we need the diameter. So if it's 10.1 halfway, then what is it all the way across? 20.2 is the diameter. Put in your calculator and round to the nearest tenth, and we get the circumference is equal to 63.4 meters. Oop, extra loop in my M. In terms of pi, the diameter is 20.2. I need to fix that. 20.2 pi. Pretty simple. Circumference equals pi times diameter. Use 3.14 for pi, or sometimes don't if you're supposed to leave your answer in terms of pi. Make sure you're paying attention to what part of the circle you're being given. If you have questions, write them down, and we'll talk about them in class. See you soon.